Welcome back to 12 News at 6. It was a crime that was as shocking as it was violent. The CEO of one of America's largest health insurance companies gunned down in cold blood in a targeted attack. Now, very few would say that America's healthcare system isn't in need of overhaul. And in the still early stages of the investigation into accused gunman Luigi Mangione, it appears his dissatisfaction with the healthcare system led to the shooting. But what's astonishing is the reaction. The number of people praising Mangione, commenting on his good looks, and saying that what he did was justified instead of the disgust that would normally go with someone indicted for murder. So what's going on in this country? Why are we singing the praises of an accused killer? Let's break it down. Has America become desensitized? And if so, what's causing it? A grand jury has charged Mangione with 11 counts, including first-degree murder. His lawyers have indicated he'll plead not guilty. All of this in the wake of the murder of Brian Thompson, which some have celebrated.
We're seeing, which is always the most dangerous situation, is people either condoning violence or maybe mobilizing to violence. That's where the concern is right now, that contagion effect that could take off.
This murder has created a ton of reaction online, which is a growing concern for law enforcement.
And let me be perfectly clear. In the nearly 2 weeks since Mr. Thompson's killing, we have seen a shocking and appalling celebration of cold-blooded murder. Social media has erupted with praise for this cowardly attack. People ghoulishly plastered posters threatening the other CEOs with an X over Mr. Thompson's picture.
And there are already reports in Hollywood that a documentary on this killing is being produced. According to some outlets, it'll look at people's reactions to the killing and their frustration with America's healthcare system.
But no matter how angry we are, you cannot take a weapon, a ghost gun, put a silencer on it, target someone, and shoot them. That's the bottom line.
We don't celebrate murders, and any attempt to rationalize this is vile, reckless, and offensive to our deeply held principles of justice.
Some officials worry that this case could lead to copycat violence.
This incident has created a torrent of online reactions, many of which cross over into a more uncomfortable realm of territory that we would think of as closer to threats.
In fact, jury selection could become difficult in this case, and there's unease over finding non-biased jurors due to the apparent swell of public sympathy for Mangione. Well, from skits on Saturday Night Live to the shirtless photos of the accused killer, which immediately went viral, getting more than 31 million views, to Mangione being referred to as, quote, a gorgeous vigilante. There is an extraordinary interest, even a fixation, some would say, on Mangione's appearance. Dr. Morgan Francis with Scottsdale Premier Counseling joins us tonight to talk about why people praised this accused shooter. What do you think's going on?
Well, he doesn't fit the typical mold of what we would think of as a murderer. He's a 26-year-old man, has a high school diploma as a valedictorian, Ivy League education, has a master's in engineering, and also worked as a data engineer. Comes from a very well-known family in the Baltimore area. So we can see that there is some undeniable appeal. However, we have to take in consideration some of the psychological effects that are going on. And so one of them is the fact that the halo effect is coming into play. And really what that means is when there is an attraction to a defendant, they are seen in a more favorable light. And that—
You mean if they're physically attractive?
That, and also because of the circumstances, some people are putting him in a more favorable light. They're seen as, like you said, as a vigilante. And so when that happens, what we see is that they have an advantage due to this physical appeal, and they benefit from him. And they're skewing the judgment, meaning they are creating a perception that is less guilt and innocence. And actually, we have seen this play out before in the Menendez trial. And we've also seen this with a former felon, Jeremy Meeks, who America dubbed as the hottest felon. And his picture was plastered all over the internet.
So is that a subconscious reaction?
It can be, or it can be really direct. And I mean, I've heard from several of my clients that, oh, they find him very attractive and appealing. And I think that kind of can play into that whole bad boy effect, right? Where a person holds this power because they're dangerous. And there's this phenomenon of attraction and creating this eye candy of a criminal. And it's very fascinating and very interesting to watch because people get intrigued with danger and rebellion.
How much of it do you think is because people perceive Mangione as someone who stood up to corporate greed and thought that the CEO represented that greed, and many Americans are feeling that same defiance against greed and corporate inequity in America?
Yes, and you bring up a really good point, Mark, that we're seeing that his physical attractiveness is representing exactly that, the corporate and systemic inequalities with affordable health care. And so people are thinking of him as a hero, and yet this was a murder, and he shot someone in the back.
In cold blood.
In cold blood.
The other thing that I've noticed, and I want to get your feelings about this, is there just seems to be this bubbling anger all across the country, whether it's political or corporate or racial or religious. Why is America so angry?
Well, by definition, anger is when there's a threat to our safety, and that anger and that threat could be as a result of physical safety, emotional safety, or financial safety. And so America is reacting. And I think because we are so much immersed into what we see with access to media 24/7, those feelings are heightened. And the number one emotion that people engage in is anger. So we're seeing that played out more and more with comments and feedback and disruption on social media.
Which brings me to the perfect platform for that anger and disruption, which is social media. How much of what we're seeing happening across the country is amplified by social media, and how dangerous is that?
It can be very dangerous, and that is why we really need to have other outlets for people to live their lives. You know, staying in front of your computer, staying in front of your phone is not healthy for anyone. And so as a therapist, I really encourage my clients to create boundaries around how much time they are spending on their phones and also the information that they are consuming. It's not healthy for us to consume news and information all the time, especially around something as sensitive as this topic.
Yeah, it's one thing probably to be angry. It's another to feel numb and immune to murder because you simply believe it was justified. That, to me, doesn't sound like a society that is sustainable.
Correct. And we have to remember this was a human life. This was a father, this was a husband, and we need to have empathy for the situation at hand. In fact, corporations are going to continue to function. So this is not something that we should be celebrating. In fact, we really need to get back to what the facts are around the case.
How do we do that? How do we go back? Is there any putting that horse back in the barn?
Well, I think it's about us having a greater perspective at, having conversations around the inequalities of affordable health care, for one, and that is a very large conversation, but also being able to create empathy and sympathize for the grieving family.
Here's another thing that really caught my attention. Monday, we had another school shooting in America, yet another one. Tonight, America has moved on. There was a time when this would have been considered so outrageous, it would have been in the news for weeks, and now it's gone.
I know.
We've moved on.
Yes, I agree with you. It was quite alarming to see not as much outcry or pouring of emotion as we have seen in the past, especially with Sandy Hook. And so it is disturbing to think that we have become desensitized and we are maybe numb to some of the violence that is going on in America. And we really need to be paying attention to that and having conversations with each other, maybe not online, but in conversations where we know we can respect each other's opinions.
And finally, what about the media? Do we as an industry have some culpability when it comes to this desensitization?
I think we all have a responsibility, whether it's the media or us consuming. Remember, the power is within the consumer. If I continue to provide, that engagement, the media will take that. So I think it's important, again, to have those boundaries around understanding the facts of the murder.
Well, thank you for coming in. I'm really sad we're having this conversation around Christmas, but hopefully we can all maybe take a breath and in the new year become a little more sensitive and sympathetic.
I agree. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Francis, good to see you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.